Welcome to session 5 of the JointWise yoga program. We're going to focus on balancing hips and spine in a little different way. We're going to learn our final breathing technique called coffee breathing. So if we're driving down the road and we're starting to nod off, we're having a hard time staying awake, this is something you can try that might really help. And then we're going to talk about the joy of establishing a home program and putting these 12 poses together. In session 3, we talked about how to balance the hips, that the hip flexors here in the front get tight. So it tends to pull the hips this way, right? So that creates an imbalance, right? But it also rotates the hips in a little bit. So we talked before about trying to get better extension, say using bridge pose, for example. But we also want external rotation. So our last 2 poses are going to help us with that, balancing out the hips with that external rotation. So let's get started. So let's get up to speed and up to date. So movement is established on the foundation of good sitting and standing. Lateral breathing is important. Of course, we want to move well in the 3 planes of motion and lengthen out through the top back of the head in that particular direction. In session 2, we built on that foundation. Sponge Guy helped us knowing when to inhale, when to exhale. We don't want to get out of plane with our rotation, and we don't want to overflex the spine and cause problems that way or overextend. So we learned about chair pose, getting in and out of the chair, and how that relates to chair pose. And in session 3, we learned about how to pivot at that hip joint first when we do our back bends. Warrior 1 and our cobra pose. And of course, bridge and a 4x4 breathing. Week 4, we did our cat-cow pose, our balancing tabletop, and of course our tree pose. Learned about deep relaxation breathing, counting backwards, going low in the body with our breath. Session 5, already introduced that to you. These hip flexors, they cause a lot of problems. It can affect our body's alignment. So the muscles on the back side of the hip, on the opposite side of the hip, help to externally rotate the hip as well as extend it. So let's look at this model. And there's the muscles on the front that need to be balanced by the muscles in the back. So we can see those external rotator muscles from the back, and also know that the glutes, especially the gluteus maximus, also helps with external rotation, and that's very important as well. Our hip stabilizer pose will help activate those external rotators in the hips. So you can see it's going to stretch the muscles in the front, but also strengthen the muscles back. Do external rotation. So let's have a closer look at our hip stabilizer pose. So you can see we want the knees over the ankles, and in this case I'm pressing out against my hands, and my hands pressing in against the knees to really activate those hip external rotators. Reach past chair pose, knees out over the ankles. Press out against the hands against the knees, activate those muscles, and then there's an arm position that you can use as well. And then walk out of it. Warrior 2 pose also activates the hip external rotators, so it's very much like half of that hip stabilizer pose that we did, and then the rest of it is kind of like our warrior pose except turned out a little bit more. Reach back past chair pose, press out against that hand, keep that knee turned out, and then there's the arm position. Use momentum to flow up out of it. Hey, congratulations. Now you have learned the 12 yoga poses to help keep your body limber, strong, flexible, and hopefully safe while you're doing the poses with what you've learned. So now we're going to do one more review of the poses. And while you watch, really think about the concepts that you want to apply and why you're using them for each of the poses. So let's look at the review. Let's do a review and quick summary of the poses that we've covered in the Joint-Wise yoga course. Let's get started. From seated pose, let's do a little forward bend, but notice the long arcing motion. A long arcing motion rather than a short compressed motion. So the head should come out past the knees, And then when we do a side bend, we want to let the body come a little forward, as that's easier on the spine. Then, being real equal on the sitting bones, twist using the belly muscles primarily. Rib cage stays level. And then a warm up for chair pose. When we get in and out of a chair, it's a good idea to let the eyes go perpendicular to the angle of the body so that the head stays in line with the spine. And we want to do that in chair pose as well. And another variation. Here's why it's a good idea to have the chair behind you, at least when you're first practicing. Let's do our forward bends, and it's from a standing position. And then side bend. Staying equal on the 2 feet, the 4 corners of both feet. Twisting using primarily the belly. Keep the legs facing forward. And with forward bends, a very good practice is to feel how to let some forward and backwards momentum help you come back up from the flexed position. And then you can try it without the chair. Here's why. We don't want to lead with the head. How it overworks the back. Use momentum to flow forward and back. Warrior 1, coming through chair pose. Use momentum. Here's why we want to use momentum. The spine will try to lead instead. Warrior 2. Keep that knee over the foot. And use momentum to flow back forward. Back through chair pose. Warrior 2. And flow. Let's do tree pose. And then hip stabilizer, also known as goddess pose. Press out equally with both legs. From a neutral spine, rock back to cat pose. We want to go backwards, and then when we come forward, extend through the thoracic spine. So back in this direction, and then forward, trying to extend more here than here. And with the neutral spine, not letting the back sag. And we can do balancing tabletop. Let's come down to do cobra. Let the butt go down first so that the hips participate. And a modification. You could also do a modification by just working the way up to the elbows. Work your way up to your elbows and stay on your elbows for a few minutes. And finally, let's work our way up to bridge pose. So flowing up, feel the four corners of the feet. But as you press up, you may feel the heels work a little bit more to activate the buttocks muscles more than the back. And then here's a good opportunity to practice relaxation pose. The breathing method we're going to learn this week is called coffee breathing. Well, actually, it's called fire breathing. But what it does is it helps you stay alert, feel vibrant. Let's give it a try. What we do is you take 10 sharp breaths out through the nose, like you're sniffing out, like blowing your nose. So you might want to have some Kleenex handy. So you take 10 sharp breaths out, like that. 10 sharp breaths out, and then we big breath in, and then we're finished. Let's give it a try. For your convenience, here's a list of the 12 postures. In our practice session, we're going to go through each of the postures. So get ready to practice, and let's practice together.